We just worked with a lot of different people in a lot of different capacities. We do everything from kind of script writing to narrative direction to sensitivity and representational and inclusive reading. We do kind of story punch-ups, script doctoring, whatever touches story, we'll do it, and we've done it for a lot of different people.
And there's a genuine value of inclusion there that's not just ethical, it's monetary.
Xbox, Microsoft are buying so much video game development studios, it's impossible for them to lose in this competitive console war, especially when they have a PC and an Xbox console to compete against Sony, PlayStation, and Nintendo. That seems to be the case if you're looking at some of the properties they got, especially with Bethesda, with Activision Blizzard and Call of Duty, Fallout series, Overwatch, World of Warcraft. You would say it's impossible for them to fail, but I think that is the reason why they will fail, because they're hiring the wrong people to manage these studios. If you just look at some of the hires they've recently done for Compulsion Studios, one of the studios they purchased, you realize they're hiring people from Sweetbaby Inc., a consultancy firm known for ruining games in the video game industry, known for injecting progressive political stances in their video games. You can see that effect already on a whole host of games that have recently come out for the Xbox. You can see it in Starfield with almost a wholesale complete uglification of the majority of the NPCs in that environment. You can see it in the overall presentation of the characters, the dialogues between characters, the overt political stances that are being made where it's just distracting for players. And you see that with the results of Starfield being almost completely abandoned upon its release. And I think that is something that we're seeing with a bunch of titles that are under the care of Sweetbaby Inc., failing in multiple categories when they're releasing their video game titles with their influences. If you don't know anything about Sweetbaby Inc., it's a consultancy firm that is known for guiding narrative structure, story structure, and overall diversity and equity and inclusion in the video game industry, and their influence is pervasive. If you played Spider-Man 2, if you played God of War, if you played Alan Wake 2, the influences of race swapping multiple characters, injected them in stories, adding disabled characters, making you play as Mary Jane and playing as a disabled character in Spider-Man 2, reducing the role of Peter Parker in his own game until he's like a secondary character. These are influences that you see from Sweetbaby Inc. that have a policy of minimizing the role of majority male characters and focusing on a majority of minority characters and elevating them and lifting their voices, as they would say. And you can see this happening in these unique properties that have come out. You can see with Skull and Bones, Ubisoft, the ugly characters there, the overall focus on minority characters. You can see that as well within those games. And not to say there's anything wrong with doing that, but the way they pursue this elevation of minority groups is by downgrading any other group that's in their way. And I think that result is churning away players. And I think having that mindset enter your studio, getting high managerial roles in your company, is going to lead to the overall destruction of that video game studio. And that's what they're doing with multiple open roles in their company. They're giving it away to people that have this Sweetbaby Inc. mindset, or are directly managers or consultants from Sweetbaby Inc. They're kind of intermingling with the overall studio heads within Microsoft. And this is happening with Compulsion Games, where they hired someone there that has a distinct bias against white people and white adjacent Asian people who they consider white as well. And this is kind of a controversial statement, but not so controversial if you have that progressive political mindset where you're against anyone that you perceive to be more powerful than you, which is kind of a strange statement where you see yourself as a victim and loser in comparison to someone else. And this is one of the hires they had, a former consultant from Sweetbaby Inc. being hired at Compulsion Games, who's taking a creative role within the company in their development of some of their titles. And this is happening consistently throughout all the Microsoft studios, and you can see that with their reaction to some situations with Call of Duty and Nick Merckx, all these other situations with Overwatch, and its overly zealous promotion of a lot of LGBTQ content. You see this happening throughout all the westernized industry, and I think that is going to be something that is never going to leave Microsoft. It's going to be there for over decades, because it doesn't matter if Xbox fails, because Microsoft is a giant corporation and they'll always be making money, and the company itself will not fail. And I think that's the main thing I'm saying here, where Xbox is in a desperate situation right now, because they won't change and pivot like Sony, because Sony makes a significant portion of its profits from the video game industry. It has to focus and pivot if there's a disinterest in their games because of some of the content. And I think that's a fact that Xbox never has to face, because Microsoft is producing so much other things that are making money for Microsoft, where they don't have to focus on Xbox. That's why they subsequently almost gave up the console war, where they're thinking, we don't have to focus on this. We already have a PC as a focus. We're just going to develop that, and we don't need to be concerned with the console wars. Where Sony and Nintendo, they have to focus on the console wars because a significant portion of their money comes from that. And I think that is a desperate situation that Xbox doesn't have, where it doesn't have to be concerned about making profit in video games. And that's where I say that is the danger zone for Xbox now, because like similar situations like Marvel Comics, DC Comics, once they were consumed by bigger conglomerates or corporations that didn't care about the profits from comic books, once that occurred, the activists entered the comic books industry, injecting their political stances and biases into those comic books until they drove those heralded franchises like Batman, Superman, Marvel's X-Men, Spider-Man, Captain America, taking those entities and driving them to the ground where no one wants to read any comic books anymore. And it doesn't matter, they're still producing the same tired messages in those comic books because the profitability of those comic books don't matter. It's just the political messaging. And I think that is a state where Xbox is currently in, where the messaging is the only thing that matters for the people that are developing video games at Xbox. It doesn't matter anything else that they're producing. It doesn't matter the profit margins. As long as they continue to produce message-based games, you're going to get that. And I think that is what we're going to see with Microsoft in the future, where it's going to be hard for it to pivot and change. Sony, PlayStation, Nintendo, they still have to make money off video games. And when they try to do a pivot towards more progressive political stances and censoring some of the body figures of female characters, when they do that and they get fan backlash and a game completely fails, like Forspoken, they lose money. They get in a dire situation where they have to consider, what's our next step? We can't make another failure, or we're going to be in a position where we're almost going to have to make large layoffs, and we're going to have to do some changing in overall restructure and management. That's something where Sony, that's something where Nintendo actually have to do if they have big failures, and that's not what Microsoft has to do. Starfield is a large failure. They shrug their shoulders because Microsoft Azure, Windows, any other Microsoft product, AI structures are making millions of dollars, billions of dollars, where they don't have to consider anything else when it comes towards making a profit when it is the Xbox in mind. And I think that is where the danger is, where I see Xbox is probably going to be a big failure in the future, and it's not going to improve in any ways, no matter how much IPs and properties they have. It's just like Disney purchasing Marvel. Yeah, you have a bunch of IPs. What are you going to do with it? Who are you going to hire to control and manage it? They're going to hire Sweetbaby Inc. managers and consultants to overlook the Call of Duty franchise. You think they're going to produce quality Call of Duty games after that? No, it's going to be trash. The game mechanics are going to deteriorate over some stupid minor political messaging issue where the game is just going to be defunct and dead. And I don't think they're going to hire the developers that can innovate or improve on it either. And I think that is the state of Xbox studios and any studio being purchased by Microsoft right now. You're being bought into a dead company and a studio that soon will be dead too, along with all of its IPs. That's just my thoughts on the situation. You tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. This is just something I was thinking about when looking at Xbox and some of the titles they have and just the management that they're bringing in to oversee these studios. I just think Xbox is in trouble, especially with Sony now considering to pivot away from a lot of these progressive issues, at least in its Eastern studios that are developing video games. So you tell me what you think about the situation. Like, share, and subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.